Get ready to celebrate another life-giving book by Spirit Media. Welcome to our live worldwide celebration as we release another book from Spirit Media. We are thankful for every book we get to release. Books published through Spirit Media are available in paperback, hardback, ebook, and audiobook, everywhere books are sold worldwide. Join us now as we talk to today's author, hear about their new book, and welcome comments from you, the audience from around the world. Most people say they would like to write a book, but only 2% ever do. Together, let's celebrate a significant milestone in and through today's author. Please put your hands together as Kevin White, CEO of Spirit Media, welcomes today's author to the show.
Hello everyone. How are you? I'm Kevin. I'm coming at you live from the headquarters of Spirit Media here in Raleigh, North Carolina. And we are so glad to have you joining us. Put your hands together. Give a big round of applause for our author today, Chase Gardner. How are you, my brother?
I'm good. How are you doing, Kevin?
I'm doing well. Doing good. It's good to congratulate you on your new book, In the Wildreness.
Got a copy as well. Look at that.
Yeah, published author. You've actually published a book before. Hopefully, this book will take that first book even further.
Yeah.
But congratulations. This is a great accomplishment.
Thank you so much.
We're going to dive into it. So if you're watching on YouTube or Facebook, please leave a comment. Let's congratulate Chase together. Maybe you even have some questions as we're going through it. We're just going to spend about 25 minutes with Chase celebrating his book together. And so let's go ahead and just dive in. Before we really get to know the book, why don't you tell us about Chase Gardner?
Yeah, so I was born and raised in North Carolina and been in ministry my whole life. Actually, that's what I kind of grew up knowing I wanted to do. I talk about that in the book a little bit. And so went to Liberty University where I met my wife, came back to Raleigh, was involved in a church here, and then moved up to Asheville, North Carolina to actually start a church there. We were there for 5 years, handed off leadership, and then came back here. And so I'd run a parachurch kind of apologetics ministry called Chase Gardner Ministries. And we're getting ready to launch a new church in the area as well in January. So,
yeah, wow, great. You and I have actually served on a church staff together.
Yeah.
I'm so glad to know you. We go way back, and I am grateful to have shared an office with you. I'm glad to have shared a platform with you. And now we get to share this book with the world together and just partner. And it's just an honor to know you and to know Chase Gardner Ministries. And so why did you write In the Wilderness?
Yeah, there's been a few seasons in my life where, I'm a pastor. I understand the Bible. I like to think I do. I mean, I devote my life to teaching it and helping explain it. And even in my life, there were some seasons where like a month into it, a year into it, 3 years into it, I'm like, what in the world are you doing? And I think we like to think of the Christian life, at least early on, as here's step A, B, C, D, and E, and God's just going to take you all the way to Z. And God can be really confusing. I mean, the closer you get with him and the deeper you get into your spiritual walk, the more confusing he can be. And so I actually took an RV trip with my family. So we have 2 teenagers and a toddler. At that time, she was a toddler. We adopted one of our foster children. And we rented a 32-foot RV, and we rented it in San Diego, and we drove all around Southern California to all the national parks, to Joshua Tree and to Sequoia and to Yosemite and to Big Sur and to San Francisco and back to San Diego. And the first place we went was Joshua Tree, and it was this deserted wilderness that I'd never been before. And I was sitting there that first night after we unpacked the RV, after the temperature dropped below 104 degrees and you could actually leave. And I was reading through the book of Genesis and God's call to Abraham and reading about, Jacob's wandering in the desert, same with Isaac. And the stories really took on a new light. I had never been to the desert, but I realized as I was sitting there reading these stories that God took a lot of the people he loves into an environment like I was in, a desert or a wilderness, this inhospitable place where it's hard to survive. It's uncomfortable. It's hot during the day. It's cold at night. And I started thinking that God had never led me into a literal wilderness or a desert before, but he had led me into some spiritual wildernesses, some confusing times where, you think the promise is right around the corner and God kind of makes you do a U-turn or takes you way off course. And so I started thinking through that, and I put together a sermon series for our church. I actually think I remember seeing you on Thursday nights sometimes listening to these sermons, and it was so impactful to a lot of people and to me, that I decided, hey, why don't I take these sermons and make them larger and more in depth and really put it in book form. So that's what kind of led me to write the book, was the impact a lot of those sermons had on my life, but also other people's lives.
Yeah, yeah. I love when God puts us in a setting that really brings out scripture. You hear, and Jesus saw the crowds, and you don't really think a lot about that in North Carolina. We
Yeah,
think that a crowd is maybe NASCAR or something like
yeah.
that. But when you go over to India and you see millions of people, mass population, you really begin to understand those words. And so, talk to us about desert. I mean, why did you actually zero in on In the Wilderness as the title of this book?
Yeah. So, just like you said, a lot of those stories came to life in Joshua Tree. It was a protected stargazing area. So that first night I could look up and there's zero light pollution. And it seemed like there was like a billion more stars in the sky than we could see back home. And God's promise to Abraham, hey, you're going to have more kids than the stars that you can count in the sky. And it just kind of came alive. We
Mhm.
went hiking the next day, and it seems like it's completely like a dead wilderness. But if you're quiet, you can kind of hear like insects buzzing, like bees buzzing in the shadows of the rocks. And you can hear like crickets and locusts and all that sort of stuff scurrying on the ground. So you could survive if you knew how to. And that's why did John the Baptist survive on locusts and honey? Well, that's all you can really find out there, but you could survive for a long place. So all of these stories started to come alive. And really what you might not know is that the Hebrew word for wilderness is actually another word. It actually means mouth or to speak as well. And so a
Mm,
lot of places, like especially in Hosea, where he's pursuing Gomer, the prostitute, he says, I'm gonna go chase her into the wilderness, and I'm gonna speak tenderly to her there. And wilderness and speak tenderly are the exact same Hebrew word. And so a lot of the Hebrews used to call the desert the place of speaking. It's a
mm,
place kind of the voices of the world die down, and it's just you and God. And God
mhm,
can speak to you so clearly. And it's really hard to find one of the heroes of our faith who did not spend at least a literal season in the wilderness. You have Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, Joseph. You have David, who spent many years out in the desert, kind of wandering around with his merry men before he took the throne. Even after he had been anointed king by God, the people didn't realize it. You see John the Baptist, you see Jesus spending time. That's how he starts his very first ministry. And so going through these stories, and we just hit on 5 of them, but there's so many more. Maybe I'll do In the Wilderness part 2. Who knows?
mhm.
You really get to see some of God's reasoning or some of his sovereign wisdom behind why he brings certain people into the wilderness, and we can take those reasons and apply it to our own life. And it doesn't make the wilderness any easier to get through. I don't think it's ever comfortable, but it just supercharges your faith knowing that there is a reason behind it, and it might be this, it might be that. But God doesn't do this because he's punishing you or he dislikes you. He's taking you into this uncomfortable season to really prepare you for the promise that's just around the corner. And so, yeah,
Yeah, love that. Love that. You're actually ministering to me, and I can only imagine even everyone on the episode that's really going to be encouraged, because in the American understanding of desert, it's like God sends you to prison.
yeah,
And yet in the biblical Hebrew, as you just brought out, no, he's taking you into his voice. He's
mhm.
speaking during that time. And I just hope anyone that feels like they're in a desert right now is encouraged by what you're sharing. You share your desert experience of adoption in
Yeah.
your book. You want to just unpack that just for a minute and just really help us to see into Chase and Jenny, and how did God first of all minister to his servants, you and Jenny, and through your own desert experience.
Yeah, I think that's the chapter where we talk about Abraham. But yeah, there's we always wanted a big family, and so statistically, Jen and I should not still be married. We just celebrated 17 years, praise the Lord. But we got married super early. I met her in January, told her I loved her in February. When on our first date in February, told her I loved her in March, asked her dad if I could marry her in April, and then we were engaged later at the end of the summer. So we got married super young. I was 21 when we got married. We had our first kid the first year, Rory, who's now 15. And then 13 months later, we had a second child, and we wanted a large family, so we started adopting from Ethiopia. And so that was the country that had the greatest need. We were so young. That was really the only country we could kind of adopt from. And so if you've ever been through the adoption process, it's long. We had to go through tons and like a mountain of paperwork. Funds are needed. So $20,000, $30,000 to adopt, just to make sure all the paperwork's legal, to get everything in country in Ethiopia set. And so we went through that process. We pawned everything. Like I sold my kayak, my mountain bike, my rock climbing gear. Jenny actually sold her wedding ring. We pawned her wedding ring just so we could bring baby Ethiopia home. That's what we called them. We actually moved the girls into their own room. So they shared a room, and we set up a little bed for the baby with a little mobile from animals from Africa. And we would pray for baby Ethiopia every night. And then about a year into the process, there were some problems in country. So there was maybe some issues of child trafficking. They weren't sure, but because of the agency that we went through, they were so above board, they had to pause, which means that we had to go through the process again. So we had to do all the paperwork again. We had to raise the funds again. We had to do all of that. And still we would pray for baby Ethiopia like every night. And then about 15 months later, we get another call. Hey, things aren't fixed. And so you have to go through this process a third time. So 3 times, this is probably 5 years into it. We had to go through the process again, same paperwork, same amount of money, same process again, still praying for baby Ethiopia. And then we got a call 5 or 6 years into it that I'll never forget. We were at our home church. Kevin, you've been there. We were upstairs, and our adoption agency said, hey, it's gotten so bad in Ethiopia that we're going to have to officially consider the country closed, because we don't want to we want to treat these kids with dignity and with respect and be above board. And because we were too young, we couldn't transfer to a different country. And so in that moment, we heard that all of your efforts, all of those funds, that money that people gave, it really came to nothing, and our adoption journey was over. And I remember just kind of sitting stunned, and Jenny, my wife, was crying. And we went through a season, I did, probably of a few years, where we didn't really talk about it. We put up the home study, all the documentation. We packed up the crib, and we moved our oldest back into that room, and we stopped praying for baby Ethiopia. And we didn't really know what was going on. If I'm honest, there was probably some anger in my heart. There was a feeling of, God, like you say, care for the widows and the fatherless. Like we were just trying to obey you. What in the world is going on? And then you have to call the people that gave money, and hey, it came to nothing. So it was a weird process where it's like, okay, I feel like God let me down, but we also felt like, we feel like you want us to care for the widows and the orphans, and we don't know how much longer we can keep our end of the bargain, And I remember reading and you can read the chapter on Abraham. Abraham got to a point where he felt that way as well. After 10 years in the desert, he kind of has a crisis of faith, and God's so kind, and he meets him there. And that's where he says, hey, the promise still stands. I know Abraham thought it was just going to be a few days walking into the wilderness, and then he gets a land, and then he gets a blessing, and then he gets kids. But that 1 month turned into 2 years to 5 years to 10 years. And God meets him there and shows him that a relationship with God is very different than a relationship with someone else. Like we often feel like if I do my part, God has to do his. And I'm going to actually put God into my debt by the way that I sacrifice and the things that I do. And God kind of showed me through that story, and he showed Abraham that it's a one-sided relationship. Sometimes we feel like that, like I'm doing all the work, God, you're not doing anything. It is a one-sided relationship. It's just the opposite. God is doing absolutely everything. There's nothing that we can do to further his plan or to earn it. And that's where he says, Abraham, go ahead and cut those animals apart. And he cuts a covenant with him, but God's the only one that walks through, right? Abraham doesn't meet him in the middle. And it was God telling Abraham, hey, this relationship that we have, it's completely based on me. Like if I don't uphold my end of the bargain, you can kill me. I'll give up my life. And if you don't uphold your end of the bargain, I'm going to give up my life as well. And we see the fulfillment of that covenant in Jesus. And in Jesus, we see a God who we can never put in our debt, that if every single thing that we receive from him is not earned. It is just a completely meritless mercy, grace upon grace upon grace. And And so as it happened, we got into foster care about 7 years after we started adopting, and we had 2 beautiful boys as emergency placement, and they were therapeutic, and we were able to find a good permanent solution for them. Then we moved back to Raleigh and decided to go through the foster care system one more time. And in August of 2020, I'll never forget, they called and they said, hey, there's a 1.5-year-old little girl that really needs a home, and she needs a safe place to stay. And about 2 p.m, they called us, and by 4 p.m, they showed up in a van. I'll never forget, Malaysia's her name. I can say it because we actually ended up adopting her, but I'll never forget her peeking through the door and we welcoming into our home. And 3 or 4 years later, she ended up becoming our child. So we adopted her last November. If you look at the calendar, it's 10 years almost to the date that our adoption fell through. And so when we doubt God, or when we say, hey, you're not upholding your end of the bargain, well, we just are on a completely different timetable. And what God has for us will always be different, but will always be so much better than anything that we could have planned or dreamed for ourselves. And so, that's just a little part of our story. We've had multiple seasons like that, where it's, what in the world are you doing, God? And that's what this book is really about. It's about those times where God pulls back the curtains and allows us to see behind the scenes, all the different ways that he uses these wilderness seasons to encourage us, to bless our socks off. It's interesting with Abraham, he got to a point where he realized he was not brave, he was not strong, he was not faithful, he was not honest. He got to a point where he realized there's absolutely nothing that I can do to earn anything from God. And that's the moment that God blesses his socks off, And so, that's kind of what the theme of this whole book is about.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, if that doesn't inspire you to buy this book and read it, I don't know what can. Now you know why I love Chase Gardner so much and why I love his teaching. Let me just briefly take you over to Amazon. You can go, it's available everywhere books are sold. But right now it's available in paperback, hardback, and the ebook. Chase, are we working on the audiobook? I think we are, right?
We are. Yes, sir.
Yeah. Yeah. And so that'll be added soon. But if you've already read it, be sure to add your review, because that will help complete strangers to find the book.
Yeah.
Because 93% of people on Amazon consider the reviews before they purchase. And as you'll see there, it's only an 85-page book. This is a good, solid book, but it's a quick read. Yeah. And it is packed with stories like what Chase just told you, along with biblical teaching, so that you can really grow deeper in your faith and in your understanding of God and his word. And I just love how you brought the gospel of Jesus out of Abraham and even applied it to where the rubber meets the road in your and Jenny's life. Yeah. I really appreciate that. So obviously God cares about his servants, and he talks to you and Jenny and brings you into alignment with his word. And then he uses that as a testimony. It says, yeah. and the enemy will be defeated by the blood of the Lamb and the testimony of the saints. And we even, I'll come back to Spirit Media in just a minute, but talk to me about the testimony. Like, what vision did God give you? Because obviously you could have written it and emailed it out and said, hey, if anybody wants to read it, read it. Why would you invest in publishing it and getting it out? What's the vision of what God showed you he's going to do in the hearts and minds of his people, and use this to the ends of the earth?
Yeah, I think it's true that if you're not in the desert season, then you're just coming out of one, or you're about to go in one. It's we're not all in the mountaintop, and it's not all valleys. But this life and this present already, but not yet kingdom, right? We're still in a sin sick world. And so we're going to suffer and we're going to go through hard times. The cool thing is that all of that is according to the sovereign will and the plan of God. And so I can't tell you how many people that I just meet on a daily basis, my neighbors, parents that I'm standing on the sideline of a soccer field, watching my daughter play, or watching Malaysia do gymnastics and strike up conversations. You'll be surprised when people are honest how many people really are suffering. And our world really sells them lies. Like, you're suffering because you're not trying hard enough, or you're suffering because you're a victim of other people's actions, or you're suffering because you just haven't found the right technique. And if you would eat keto, and if you would do ice baths, and if you would meditate, and if you would do all this sort of stuff, then your life would be perfect, and nothing could be further from the truth. But I think all of us have an amazing opportunity to minister to people who are in the midst of suffering, and point them to the hope that we have in Jesus. Oftentimes it's easier to say, hey, I have this simple little resource. I tried to keep it short and light, almost like a beach read, because I want it to be used almost like an evangelistic tract. Remember those you used to hand out? Maybe leave as a tip. Don't do that at a restaurant or something. But I meant it to be, you have someone who doesn't yet know Jesus, who's far from God, and they're undergoing suffering. And you want a way to point them to Jesus. This is a simple little book where they can read it. The gospel is easily understood in every single chapter we get to Jesus. And it's just a way where if you have your hands on a few copies of this, you can say, hey, I got a book that I want to give you. I want to make a gift to you, and really just open up conversation into them exploring the hope that we have in Jesus Christ. And so that's my hope for this book. You're right. I mean, I already have sermons. I could just put those online and do that. But this is a deeper exploration, and really written for anyone and everyone, no matter if they have an experience with church or Jesus or not, and just a way for people to have a resource in their hands to minister to people who are undergoing suffering, which is, I mean, everyone's going to go through it at one point in their life.
Yeah. So the whole mission behind Spirit Media began with Psalm 96:3, publish his glorious deeds among the nations, tell everyone the great things he has done. And you have set a great example of that, because you and Jenny could have learned this. You could have unpacked it. God could have brought you into the promised land, if you will. And no one would have necessarily needed to have watched that, and God would have still been God. Yeah. But in his sovereignty, he has exhorted his people. I'm going to bless your socks off. You talk about Abraham. He said, I'm going to bless you and make you a blessing. Mm-hmm. And it's by sharing the story, sharing the good deeds of what God has done, that it provides a witness. And so I honor you and Jenny for putting your witness out there. This is very raw. You share your real pain in it, but you also share the triumphant Jesus and the gracious God. And that's really what it's all about at the end of the day. So talk to us about just what you would share with anyone. Any other stories? So you've shared a lot about the book, but is there anything that is your favorite part that you haven't yet spoke about?
I mean, there's lots. I think the first chapter is really cool because it's kind of a preview of the other 4 chapters, where we get to see kind of a microcosm of what God does in Israel. And God gives them like 3 reasons off the bat why he chooses to lead them into a wilderness experience. It's so that they can see his goodness. It's so that other people can be glorified. A lot of times we don't even think about that. I think that's my favorite part is there's some reasons that the Bible reveals to us why God would sometimes bring us into the desert that I would never just naturally think of. A lot of times, I'm going through a hard time so that I can get stronger, so that I can know to see the Lord better. But through these stories that we go through, and just through the words of Scripture, we see, well, God has tons of purposes for why. It's interesting that when Israel goes through the sea, like God brings them to a dead end with, they're in the wilderness, right? In a dead end with the Egyptians chasing them at their back, and then an impassable sea in the front. God brings them there on purpose, and then splits the Red Sea, and then uses that same deliverance to actually judge Israel's enemies. And he does it for his own glory. It's so that other people could see his glory through what the Israelites went through. In fact, when they get to the other side and start entering the promised land, all the nations fear them greatly. Because why? Because they glorified the Lord. They saw the glory and the strength and the power of God. And so a lot of us don't even think that when we go through a time of suffering or sickness or financial hardship, we might already know God to the degree that we need to know him right then. We might be the father or the husband or the mother or the wife or the child that we need to be. We might be okay in our journey with God, but he's bringing us through this because he wants our neighbor to see our Christian friends love and care for us and start to ask questions. Or we might not get that job promotion because God wants our coworkers to see the humility and the peace that we have even in the midst of that, so that we can point them to Jesus. So probably, and there's lots of different reasons that's in the book. Probably my favorite reason was going so deep into these stories and seeing reasons why God leads us into a wilderness, into a desert, reasons that I would not naturally think of. And, I think even after we published the book, after I was done writing it, I've gone through little wilderness seasons since then. And it's so cool to think back, oh yeah, God has a reason. God has a reason. God has a reason. And it's really strengthened my faith, just the process of writing the book.
Yeah, what a powerful takeaway. Everybody should put that on a sticky note right now.
Yeah.
God has a reason, and just keep that in front of you. So again, I want to share it one more time. Go out and grab a copy of the book. Make sure you leave a 5-star review for Chase there. I actually get more than a copy. This is a great opportunity for you to share. $14. You could easily share several copies with people. Think about graduate gifts, Father's Day gifts, even holiday gifts and things. So, but devour this book and share it, and let other people benefit from it as well. Pray over the distribution worldwide. It's available. You can go to Barnes and Noble and order it there. It doesn't mean that the libraries will stock it, but let's pray that it'll be met with favor on college campuses and all over the world. And so Chase, talk to us just for a minute. First of all, team, is there any questions that anyone has posed? We've got just a few minutes. So if you do have a question for Chase, put it in the comments real quick. Lori's saying that she'll get a copy. Great. Any questions, just let us know. But Chase, talk to us about your ministry and just help us to know, how can we know more about Chase Gardner, and what is God calling you to next? If you're at liberty to share about any of that.
So I was a lead teaching pastor at a kind of a large church in the area. Love the church. But we saw a lot of people, the statistics show that a lot of people are walking away from the church, and not just the church, but their faith. It's what people call deconstruction or deconversion. And it's kind of an alarming rate just in Europe and America. This is not worldwide. I mean, the Southern Hemisphere, the church is growing like crazy. But the statistics are, for every one person that converts to Christianity here in America, 4 people deconvert, which is wild. And so one of the best things that we can do is not just to make new disciples. Praise the Lord, let's do that. But let's keep the disciples that we have, and let's prepare them for the attacks on the Bible and on Christianity that are going on in our culture. And so I started Chase Gardner Ministries with a goal to do that. We do weekly YouTube. We just started a few weeks ago, but they're kind of apologetics, but really answering some of the deep questions about the Bible. Did the resurrection happen? Can I trust the Gospels? Do we even have the original New Testament? Has it been translated? Has it been lost over the translations? And so we put videos together for that. I speak on college campuses. I go to small groups. I'm working on another book right now called Reconstruction, Rebuilding Your Faith on the Foundation of Jesus, that hopefully will come out either later this year or next year. Hopefully in the future, we're going to start to have monthly open forums here in the Triangle area where me or an expert will speak on the resurrection, or will speak on the reliability of the Bible, or if God is loving, why is there suffering? And there'll be time for questions and answers. So people that are doubting their faith or having questions about Jesus, or might have already walked away, can come to a place to have a really good, solid conversation, and hopefully maybe become more convinced of the truth of Jesus Christ. And so it's an apologetics ministry, but more tailored to people who have walked away for their faith. And so you can go to chasegardner.us for more information. You can donate. We would love donations. It's a completely donor-led ministry. And so, and then in the future, my wife and I just decided a few months ago, we said, yes, again, we're going to actually plant another church. And so in the Raleigh area in January, we're going to call it Reach Fellowship. And so that's going to launch in early January. And you can just follow me on social media for more updates about that.
Yeah. Well, that's great. So more's coming. And Chase, we love you. Today is Spirit Media's 2nd birthday.
Happy birthday.
130 in 2 years.
Wow.
Congratulations about that. But let's just thank God for Chase. Give him a big round of applause. Congratulations, my brother. Any final words? Go to chasegardner.us. Anything else you want to say?
No, that's all I got. Thank you so much, Kevin. I appreciate it.
Thank you, everyone, for helping us celebrate. We'll be back soon with another new book from Spirit Media. God bless you all.
Thank you for joining today's live broadcast by Spirit Media. a full-service publishing, marketing, and branding company in the USA. Spirit Media's multinational team has published authors from throughout the USA, across India, Australia, Ukraine, Canada, and beyond, including books in over 20 languages. Need help writing your book? No problem. Spirit Media's angel writers can help you write your book in your own words in less than 90 days. Contact Spirit Media today and let us help you write, edit, publish, and market your book to the nations. Schedule your free consultation call today and learn more about Spirit Media's long-term and systematic marketing plan, guaranteed to provide measurable results. Contact Spirit Media today. This has been an international live broadcast with Spirit Media. This program copyright Spirit Media, all rights reserved.